We just got the news that the reconciliation bill came out. It came out of committee, I should be clear, and it's supposed to be about $3.5 trillion. What we know is included in it as of right now is we actually have limited information, but we know it's expansion of Medicare for dental, vision and hearing, exactly.
How many times did you say that on the campaign trail?
All the time.
Yeah. Originally, it was supposed to be, they were saying, oh, maybe we'll lower the Medicare age to 55 or 60. By the way, anytime they give two numbers, I'm like, well, it's going to be the higher one.
Yep.
Yeah, of course. So what do you make of that? Do you view that as like a negotiating win for Bernie, that he was able to get some of the people in the committee to get to 3.5, or do you view it as a negotiation failure because it should have been 6? How do you look at it at this point?
Yeah, well, obviously the media, and I think the progressives involved, principally Bernie Sanders, are painting this as a win. And it's not clear to me how much it is a substantive win or how much it's doing the smart political thing, which is to try to sing the praises of whatever get you get while you can. To sell your own efficacy. I think that's a smart political move. Whether or not progressives and those on the outside should be taking that at face value, I think is a very different question because, of course, this is a reconciliation bill. You need everybody on board. Joe Manchin, I think, was asked yesterday what he thought about the price, and he had previously said he wasn't going to go above $1 or $2 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we've seen over the course of this year a pattern of some phase of the process going well, all of the press being written in a way that really heralds that as an accomplishment, and then seeing weeks or months later that it never manifests into anything real. So it's not that I want to be overly cynical in this moment, but I also don't want to get played for a fool again. And I think particularly for those who aren't in politics, who are on the outside, who are in the media space or in the activism space, it does us no favors to accept at face value these steps in a process. I'll be waiting to see what happens.
Right.
Yeah. I also think so first of all, I mean, there's a lot of good things that are potentially going to be included in this. And that's the other thing that I've taken issue with. The media framing has been like, this is what it is, and this is what's going to pass. Where we know Manchin already came out and said, oh, I got a lot of problems with the climate change provisions here. We know he's also said it must be deficit neutral. My personal prediction is, I'm sure you saw the Exxon lobbyist who was like, here's our strategy. We're not going to go after these individual provisions because they're popular. So what are we going to do? We're going to say, we're going to attack the pay-fors and use that as a mechanism to bring down the overall cost of the bill. I think you're going to see Manchin and the other right-wing Democrats playing that exact playbook. So the media doesn't sort of like frame this as this is their opening bid, and it's almost certainly going to get negotiated down significantly, both by right-wing Democrats and by the Senate parliamentarian for some reason, right?
Right.
But I also think you can see in all of this why the Biden administration wanted to keep that Senate parliamentarian line item veto in there, because they can do things like, we put immigration reform into the package, knowing that the parliamentarian is probably going to strip that out.
Right.
But they can go to their allies. We tried really hard. We tried really hard on $15 minimum wage, but the Senate parliamentarian said we couldn't do it.
Right.
Probably the same thing. The PRO Act is included in this, which would be huge. It's one of, the things that I've been pushing the most in terms of getting something done in this administration that could rebalance the scales towards workers. It's another one where there might be a couple provisions of the PRO Act that can make it through the Senate parliamentarians' rulings that have, apparently the force of law. But most of it probably won't pass that muster. But again, they get to say, look, we tried. We put it in there. We just, gosh darn it, we just can't get it done.
Yeah, it's frustrating because on some level, Biden gave the game away when we did this first little do-si-do in March over the $15 minimum wage, where he, I believe at the end of February, in advance of it, signaled, hey, I don't think the parliamentarian is going to let this through.
Right.
And it was
this through. Look at the framing. Yeah.
Right. It's like
what can I do?
It's a bat signal for anyone paying attention, right? What do you think a person who serves at the discretion of the president, who can be gotten rid of at any point, do you think there's not a coordination or relationship between the things that Biden signals publicly weeks in advance of a decision and the decision that actually comes down? And I saw Bernie Sanders, I think he was on Chris Hayes maybe last night or the night before, and Chris Hayes asked him if he thought that some of the climate provisions in particular, I think, were going to get through the reconciliation process and be approved. And, Bernie kind of uncharacteristically stumbled a little bit in answering the question. And I think that he is not naive, and he knows that this is part of what's going on, which is why I think so much of the kind of chest thumping and back patting that's happening right now is about progressives trying to claim a win when there are so few. And it's not that it's meaningless. It's not that, the negotiations getting to this point don't mean something. It's not that having a different kind of public conversation about what's possible in America doesn't advance the ball in some way. But it's just frustrating when so many of the public figures who have the ability to create additional pressure to make the outcome that's desired more possible aren't framing issues in a way to do that. So if pay-fors are going to become the issue, while we have billionaires circling the planet and, an enormous economic crisis, maybe now's the time to start an outside pressure campaign to talk about a wealth tax.
Right.
If they don't like the pay-fors, well, I can show you some pay-fors that you're really not going to like. And maybe that's how you get to the compromise position that's actually advantageous.
Well, and this is the other part that drives me crazy is like, it's sort of uniformly portrayed as the pay-fors are a negative part. Like, that's the part we got to sell the public on, and this is going to be dicey, and the moderate Democrats, this may be politically perilous for them. When we've seen polling multiple times now that says, no, actually, the thing is more popular. Once people find out, oh, you're going to tax the rich and the corporations to pay for this, I like it even more now.
Right.
So rather than being like, oh, this is something we got to just deal with and this is messy and this is ugly, no, lean into this as an affirmative, positive part of what you're doing. And you'll have, so the idea that it's like a political consideration to cut down on the pay-fors and deal with these taxes in a different way is just completely silly.
You also don't even need pay-fors, so the whole conversation is dumb. Anytime they want to do something and they prioritize it, they just do it. When it comes to endless war, they're just like, we're going to do this. Nobody's like, I don't know, we can't find the pennies in order to do it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So even that whole conversation, I agree with you that those policies are good policies. I want to raise taxes on the wealthy. I want to raise taxes on the rich.
But as an affirmative, positive thing in and of themselves.
Yes, exactly. But to frame it as like, we have to do something. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. You could easily add that to the deficit. In 2017, they did a Republican tax cut bill that added trillions to the deficit, and 83% of the benefits of that go to the top 1% in the long run. Nobody batted an eyelash. Rand Paul, who pretends like he's a deficit hawk, was like, I'm voting yes on this, and nobody called him out for that.
Yeah.
So the whole conversation is annoying. But to get back to the original point, I do struggle with this. I struggle with how you walk that line between, I don't want to be a partisan cheerleader, because I think that's stupid, but I also don't want to be overly cynical, because I feel like that's slightly less stupid, but can still be stupid.
Right.
So, like, how do you...
The always contrarian take is just as stupid as the always not contrarian take.
Because you lose credibility, and people ultimately want some wins,
right?
right?
Yeah.
And it becomes a depressing, no one wants to tune in every week to hear you tell them how terrible the world is and how it's not getting better, right? So, I think that it's important where you can acknowledge a real win to do so, and that just kind of like narratively, rhetorically, aesthetically balances it out a little bit. But the reality is that cynicism is usually the smarter approach.
Right, yeah.
And there's also different ways to frame the cynicism. You can say, Bernie isn't really trying to work for us, and I think he and Nancy Pelosi are somewhere eating their Talenti ice cream together and like laughing at the floor. And you can kind of create that narrative in your head as to why things are happening the way they are.
Yeah.
Or you can say, look, I think that Bernie understands he's up against a lot, and this is what he thinks he can get in this moment. And I wish he would be the organizer in chief and try to work more with outside groups to create the kind of pressure that would enable him to do more from the inside. Let's do that. Let's pressure him in that way without necessarily writing someone off whole cloth. And it's not that I don't also feel those frustrations where I'm sometimes not sitting in my apartment going, screw so-and-so. They're not really trying hard enough. But I don't know. I think that while we can all have those kind of moments, strategically, that doesn't get me anywhere. I'm just mad.
Right.
And that's good for me and my therapist, but not necessarily for a broader movement.
So how do we handle Manchin? Because what I look at is, like, if Biden really cared and really wanted these things, Manchin said, as you guys pointed out, everything needs to be paid for, and I don't want to raise corporate taxes too much, and I don't want to raise taxes on the wealthy too much, but everything needs to be paid for, which means, logically, they just want a much smaller bill. So if you're Biden, is Manchin movable if you call him into your office and you're like, here's the deal, I'll be your best friend or your worst enemy. If you vote for this bill, if you vote for my agenda, you'll get another military base in West Virginia, or you'll get extra infrastructure projects, or you'll get a position in the administration, or whatever you want. But if you vote against it, we're going to primary you, we're going to fully fund the primary opponent, and I'm going to ruin your career. Would that work, you think?
I'm naive and relatively new to politics, but it seems to me that the President of the United States might have some influence in these matters. I don't know. I think that there's obviously a great deal of corruption in Washington, and Manchin is, at the top of the list. And I don't know why it always seems to be the case that you can only corrupt people to do bad things for the people and not influence them with spending.
Mafia tactic, but it'll work.
To do a good thing. I know, it's never carrots for good. Right. It's only carrots for evil.
It's like instead of good trouble, let's get into some good corruption.
Good mob tactics.
So between that and, what did Bernie say when he was running? That he was going to go to,
West Virginia,
and, stand in the front yards of Mitch McConnell's front yard, all of the bad actors. And really expose the extent to which there is this huge gap between what these representatives, what these Congress people are advocating for and what the people in their districts actually want.
Right.
And that, I think, is a really actually scary and effective proposition for folks. Remember that in 2016, Bernie won every district in West Virginia. He is not someone who is dismissed or not taken seriously in that part of the world, especially given the crisis that we're in right now, which if you turn on the news, you would think it's all over.
Right.
You would think that it's not the case that no one working a minimum wage salary can afford an apartment in America. You would think or two-bedroom, I think, an apartment in America. You would think it's not the case that, over 500,000 people just died. It's not the case that a third of those deaths, those COVID-related deaths, are attributable to not having health care. You would think that, the idea of running victory laps around America finally maybe getting paid family leave when we're an outlier on the globe for not having it, that we were, as a country, are going to run victory laps for expanding Medicare to cover ears, eyes, and throat.
Right.
It should really be a horror moment that that's not already the case, and that also the odds of me getting Medicare for all by just turning 60 seem, at this point, higher than advocating for Medicare for all because we actually have Medicare for all.
Yeah.
Right?